Hi everyone, Chris here with Rainbow Guys DIY. Today Lance and I are going to show you how we took this old piano that we picked up from a thrift store for $12 and turned it into our new plant shelf for our living room. So first we started by disassembling the piano, taking care not to really damage it too much. We weren't really sure what we were going to find inside, so we just kind of took our time, taking it apart piece by piece. The original plan was to try and remove the harp from the back of the piano because that's where the bulk of the weight of a piano comes from. We're going to be installing some new flooring, and I don't want the piano to damage that. One of the casters is broken. They were the original metal casters. One of them was broken and tilted, and I didn't want it gouging the new floors. So here you can see we're trying to undo the bolts from the harp to get it removed. On Lance's side there, the pegs that hold the piano strings were getting in the way. So we removed some tension off of the first couple strings so that we can try and cut them away. You do not want to cut piano strings while they are under full tension. It's very dangerous. So you want to make sure that you remove the tension by loosening the pegs so that it's not going to snap back at you. Here you can see we're trying to figure out how to loosen those pegs. They are square. So what we ended up doing was using a small socket that fit around the end of a driver bit and then put it on the driver bit in reverse so the square end that would normally go on the socket wrench fit perfectly on the peg to then loosen them up. There it goes. That's why we wear safety glasses. Wear safety gear! A small piece of the wire flew off and hit me in the neck. It was a little alarming, but I'm okay. Just a reminder, always wear your safety gear. So here you can see I am removing the hammer assembly. There were a lot of hidden screws that I had to find to get this taken off. We weren't sure if we were going to reuse the hammers somewhere in an art piece or in the shelf somehow. So as we were disassembling the piano, we wanted to try and keep everything intact as much as possible. So here you can see I am loosening more of the piano wires. The pegs that hold them in that the piano would be tuned with actually go through the harp and into that wood you can see on the back there. So in order to get the harp off, all of those would need to be removed. So after lots of struggling and stuck screws and several stripped bits, we decided we were just going to cut out the harp. So we pulled out the reciprocating saw, drew a line straight down both sides of the piano, and cut it straight down. At the bottom there is a large block that goes all the way to the back of the piano, so we did have to change to a longer bit, you can see here, to get cut all the way through that. And then we had to cut through the bottom plate just to separate the back from the front. And there we have it. It's all removed. We just have the shell of a piano. So here I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to attach the front face back onto the piano to give it some stability while I work on trimming up the sides and the bottom so everything is even. So here I'm attaching some additional blocking to the front so that I can screw it to the sides without having to go through either of the faces, either the side or the front. I did pre-drill the holes so that I didn't split anything, and here you can see I am just attaching it to the sides of the piano. And now the fun part of removing all 88 keys. Our keys were already labeled 1 through 88, but you'll want to make sure that you keep those in order. Now I'm removing the bottom and the foot pedals, and using my circular saw to clean up the edges so it's a nice straight line all across. The sides were a little loose at the bottom, so I am just adding some additional screws for strength there. I'll come back and fill those holes in later. And then just a quick cleanup. All right, now that we've got it all disassembled, we're going to start building it back up. I have already reattached the front here and the top. I needed to attach this to give it stability while I trim down the sides. So now I am going to add some new casters on the bottom. We're going to lift it up. We needed to raise it up so we can scoot some chairs under. So I'm going to raise it up about 5 inches. So I have some boards and casters to attach to the bottom. And then I'll just start, we're going to add some small shelves here. Going to add some small shelves here just to fill in this gap so it doesn't look awkward. Hi, kitty. And then a shelf on the bottom here. I'm also going to reinstall the pedals just for an aesthetic look. And then put a back on the top part. We are going to leave the back of the bottom part exposed so that we have access to the power outlet. But there will be a shelf along the bottom. And I think that's going to be it. Then I can start reinstalling all the keys, which will probably take a bit. And call it good. We needed to lift it up about 5 inches from the ground. The casters I bought were about 4.5 inches. So I put in this 1-inch board, which is really 3/4 of an inch, just to add that extra little gap. The front 2 casters have brakes on them, so once we have it in place on our new hard floors, it won't roll around the living room. I did do a quick coat of spray paint on these casters. The mechanisms were all aluminum, and that was a little brighter than I wanted them to be. So now I'm going to install some little shelves that go under the sides of the face where there's that gap where the shelf used to be. I used this piece of the piano that had a little decorative trim, but I didn't like the way that it sat on the shelf, so I ended up tracing it out again on a corner of the board where it was just flat. I was trying to reuse as much of the original material as possible, so I cut out 2 of those shelves, and you can see I installed them there on the front. I did end up needing to purchase an 1/8-inch thick piece of plywood to act as the back here. So here I'm just stapling it into place with some long staples. For the bottom shelf, I was actually able to reuse the original lead shelf up top where you would put your sheet music. So I just trimmed it down and notched out the corners so that it would fit perfectly in the bottom section. It actually had a small lip on the front side of it that I flipped around to the back side, so it will help stuff from falling behind the shelf once we get it all put into place. And here I'm adding some blocks just to reattach the pedals. The notches in the front there are actually cut at a slight angle, so if I were to reattach just to those, they would face downward a little more than I would have liked. I went back and filled in all the screw holes with some dowels, and I'm just trimming those up so I can sand them flush before I get everything ready for paint. Quick sand over the whole thing just to scuff up the old finish. That way I can make sure the new paint sticks well. I will be using a chalk paint. I'll link a video down below that I used to get the recipe for this chalk paint. I made it myself. It's basically 1 part plaster of Paris to 3 parts of latex paint. You take your plaster, add some water till it's kind of a thick paste, and then mix your paint in with it. When it dries, it's a very durable finish. It's very flat, but it's very durable, and that's what I wanted on this piano. It's going to see a lot of use, a lot of ceramic pots and other stuff getting dragged around on it. So I'm just adding my first coat of paint here. The first coat usually doesn't always look the greatest, but I'm making sure everything gets covered. There were a couple spots where the original finish of the piano had bled through, so I did have to go back after the first coat with some primer to make sure that stopped bleeding through. Now I'm just adding my second coat. I ended up doing 3 coats over the whole thing, and some spots got a 4th coat if it just looked a little thin. For the final finish, I did want a slightly distressed look, so here I'm going back with some 120 grit sandpaper and just scuffing up the edges in spots so some of the black finish would show through. This way we also don't have to be as meticulous about it as we're using it to try and not scratch it up, because any new future dings will just add to the charm. So here's some real-time footage. You can see how I do the distressing. It's just a very light touch, just on the edges and the corners, anywhere you would think it would normally see wear if it had been painted 100 years ago and been moved around and used and such. And now it's time for the finish coat. So I am using a paste wax, which you basically just brush on, let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then you buff it off. So here you can see I'm buffing it just with a rag from an old t-shirt. It gives a matte finish, but it's also a very durable finish. And now that the finish is dry, it's time to get all the keys back in place. All right, got all of the keys back in. It's all painted, ready to go. Now we're going to install our grow light up in here. So I just have a 4-foot grow light and all the mounting hardware and cords that go with it. So I'm just going to get it mounted up there. We lucked out, and there are actually a few holes down here in the board from where pegs and other things, while it was a functioning piano, poked through. So I don't have to drill any new holes for the cord, and we left the back side open so we can access the power outlet, so I don't have to drill any holes there either. So these lights are pretty easy to install. We have a couple others that we've been using, so we know we like these, so that's what we ordered. There are just these 2 little metal clips that will screw in up here, and then the back side of the light unit has a little channel that will clip into it, and that's it. So I will just get those in. I do want to mark to center it back here to make sure it's not too crooked. So I'm going to go 3.5 inches from the back side. The placement of the brackets is not terribly crucial. It can clip anywhere along the back side here. I just want them somewhat near the ends. All right, so we'll take our clip and the screw. So you want to make sure that the 2 little ends are pointing down to clip on to the light. Okay. So this end is open for this to go in. So I want that on this side because that is where the hole is. It's really easy to just kind of slide it into the back side and then pop it in. I wonder if that's going to be a problem. Nope. So there's a little inline switch right here that's a little bit bigger than the hole that's drilled, but it happened to be at the perfect location. And I will use some little clips to kind of keep the cord out of the way as best I can. I know the glass is going to be pushing it against the back, so that might be enough right there. Speaking of glass, I just picked it up from the glass cutter. We got a custom piece cut that will fit from the back to the end of the keys and side to side. When measuring your glass, I would recommend leaving a little bit of clearance. So this measured out to be 56 inches from side to side, and I had them cut it at 55 3/4 so that there is 1/8 of an inch on each side. That way, I mean, it's a 100-plus-year-old piano. It's possible that it might not be parallel all the way back. There might be a warp in it, anything like that, so I didn't want to have to get it cut more than once. And then 18 inches just goes to the front of the keys. Front and back, you have a little more leeway because of the lip here. I purchased some little rubber or some little plastic self-adhesive bumpers that I'm going to put here and here and here and here for now. We'll kind of get a feel for support in the middle, and then go from there. Okay, we have our 4 on, so I can give it a test fit. Make sure it's sitting level and see if it needs additional support in the middle. This is a 1/4 inch thick sheet of glass with what is called a pencil edge. which is a nice rounded finish on the edges. Actually looks pretty good. The little metal pegs at the back are touching it, which is pushing the front ends up ever so slightly, which is fine. But it looks like the black keys are now at the perfect level, at least some of them are, where I can just put one of those bumpers on them, and that will help support more in the middle. This guy here. And then one a little towards the middle. All right, I can take all the little cork protectors off from the glass cutter. And there you have it. Now for some pretty shots. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Also be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. You can also follow us on social media at rainbowguysdiy for even more content. See you next time.